Hello, everyone, and welcome to Where Your Creative Capacity Gets Blocked, understanding the three capacities and how it affects your creative flow. I am really excited to chat with you today about creativity and capacity and how the two go together, particularly in the ways in which capacity creates more clarity and more creativity, which then actually continues to expand our capacity. And the ways in which when we are feeling unclear and creatively blocked, it can actually spiral downwards and start to limit our capacity. We are going to talk about the three capacities, which is a framework I created, and then also how that really plays in with your creative flow. So, I am Jen Underwood. If you are unfamiliar with my work, I am a capacity specialist. My background is in trauma resolution, somatic work, and therapeutic work. I am actually an ex-therapist. I was a teacher. I was a high school teacher for a number of years in inner city schools. I didn't feel like I was having the impact that I wanted there. I noticed that my favorite part was always the end of the day when I was able to like hang out with kids and actually find out what was happening in their day-to-day life and help them. And so I went back to school. I got a double master's degree in clinical counseling and addiction studies and jumped into social work and therapeutic work with arguably the most traumatized population on the planet, severely mentally ill, chronically addicted, and ill homeless adults. I lasted about 3 years there before I got super burnt out and accidentally stumbled into entrepreneurship. I never meant to be an entrepreneur. I know many of you feel the same way if you were in entrepreneurship. Like, oops, I didn't mean to start a business. But I did because I realized, like, oh, there's so many different ways to make money. And I can do that and create a life that really felt completely and totally impossible for me at the time as a single mom who was working a full-time job and commuting and really below the poverty line and just like struggling. Being able to start to use my creativity and use my gifts to be an entrepreneur, to put my work out into the world was amazing. I eventually went back to coaching and doing that kind of work because that's just always what I've loved. Since I was a kid, I wanted to be a therapist. So now I do it just in a different way. And I work with a lot of creatives, particularly with people who didn't mean to be entrepreneurs, who have a lot of creativity, who maybe went on their own healing journey, and found things that really worked for them, decided that they wanted to put that work out into the world, and then felt really stuck actually by doing it. Hit a lot of their edges, a lot of their visibility wounds, a lot of their creative blocks, started feeling maybe really burnt out by trying to make money from their creativity, and started just really feeling drained. And what I do now is I help people align with the soul of their work, put that work out in the world in a capacity driven, resilient way that lets them thrive, while also looking at all the ways in which they can build capacity, not just in their work, but in their life. So, really glad that you're here with me today. Let's go ahead and dive into even how I talk about capacity. So, I define capacity as actually three different distinct capacities that are either working together or fighting against each other. And those three capacities are emotional capacity, and this is our ability to stay present with ourselves, to even notice that we're having emotions, Emotional capacity allows us to relate to other people. People with high emotional capacity are incredibly good listeners. They often feel a lot. So there is often, like, people with high emotional capacity often have a lot of creativity. They are artists. Uh, they're poets, they write music, they create things because they're needing an outlet for all of these feelings that they have that they're very attuned to. They tend to be really good relationally because they know how to connect with other people. It's one of their superpowers. And then there is narrative capacity. Narrative capacity is our ability to create positive stories about ourselves, other people, and the world. Stories that support us in our resiliency, in our ability to move forward, to get up and try again, to reframe things that feel negative. Stories that help us trust ourselves and other people, that really like center into possibility and hope rather than fear and scarcity. Those are all part of a really high narrative capacity profile. Change capacity is our ability to take action. It's often what we think of when we think of capacity. Change capacity people with high change capacity, they tend to get a lot done. They can be very productive. They move through uncertainty without collapsing. They are more able to take risks. They are more able to put their feelings aside in order to really center into what needs to be done. These are our natural entrepreneurs. They are like, try all the things, do all the things. I think of Facebook used to have maybe they still have a motto back in the day, said fail faster. That is a change capacity kind of a motto. Go, 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 fail faster, iterate quicker, figure it out through movement and action, not through slowing down to feel our feelings or through thinking through it. And you'll notice above each of these are some words that we usually associate more with physical fitness. So I think of capacity in the same way as I think of physical fitness, in that we have multiple different layers of fitness. So emotional capacity is our cardio. This is like, I can keep going through all the things. Narrative capacity is our flexibility. This is our resiliency. This is our ability to be with all of life through, being able to like, I think of a tree in this, it's like, can I move with the wind or am I going to snap? Change capacity is our strength. That is, really like that's the muscles, that's the building, that's the doing, the lifting piece. And when everything's working together really well, we have this amazing ability to thrive. We continue, everything just keeps working like an ecosystem. It works like a well-oiled machine. The more we strengthen one capacity, the more we strengthen all three of them because they're all working in tandem, they're all working together. That's how we create an overall sense of health. So when things start to go off the rails is when one capacity becomes more overdeveloped than the others, or when we don't have access or reliable access to each of the three capacities. So, in emotional capacity, what this looks like in our creative process specifically is that if we have really high emotional capacity that's not balanced with narrative and change capacity, we are overly aware of all of the feelings that we have to the point where it often creates creative blocks. There's a sense of, I think about doing something and I can feel all of my fear, my sadness, my potential for hope, but then maybe it just swings right back into what if it doesn't work out? There's a bit of a spiral downward. It feels really overwhelming. Emotional capacity can end up feeling like totally swamped in your system. Nervous system wise, it's a sense of like total overwhelm that often leads to a freeze state. There can also be a lot of fawning with someone who has high emotional capacity because they're overly attuned to the potential impact that they have on everyone else. And because they're overly attuned to the potential for impact, they don't look as much at the potential of impact for good. They're looking at the potential that they might have a negative impact. And they don't want anyone to ever feel bad or to elicit an emotion of shame or fear or guilt. And in that, they can start to overly censor themselves. They're so worried about hurting someone that they don't say what's true for them, that they don't really speak into what is present for them in their own experience. They can start to um, shut down and really turn all of that emotional energy inward rather than outward in a creative flow. So that is one of the big downsides of emotional capacity if it's not balanced with the other two. Narrative capacity, if it's out of balance, if we have incredibly high narrative capacity, how this affects creativity is that we can start to tell ourselves stories about what we're creating that allow us to spin in the mental process for too long. High narrative capacity people, when they are in their creativity, get so caught up in needing to tell all of the story and needing to be thorough in it and needing for it to be perfect that they can work on it and work on it and work on it and work on it behind the scenes, behind closed doors, because they are like, I need to get this absolutely perfect before I put it out into the world. These are the people creatively who might have spent the last 10 years working on a book that no one's seen yet. They tend to put so much energy into the creation, but not into the allowing for that creation to live and actually like be born into the world that they kind of strangle it to death. They rework it and they rework it and they rework it, but they're doing that without outside information. Did people love that chapter? Did they not resonate with it at all? They don't know because they've never put it out into the world. They can also tell stories about how it's not their time. If people really wanted their work, like, when it's aligned, it'll happen naturally for them. That allows them to actually lean back and into their emotions and into their process and not putting that into the world, not taking the actions, not doing the thing. So they might have been working on that book for 10 years, or they might just have been thinking about that book for 10 years. High change capacity people definitely have a lot of creativity blocks. They look different because high change capacity people are like, I am putting things out. I'm here. I'm a machine. But it is, in fact, that very strength that they have that starts to really work against them when this is not balanced by narrative capacity and emotional capacity. So they can lose all of the emotion from their work. They become overly robotic, overly focused on methodology. They become kind of like, I'll do 20 things in a day, but not concentrate on the quality. It can be very much like quantity over quality. High change capacity people often also avoid creativity by action. So it might be like, I've been wanting to write a book forever. At some point, it'll be time for that. But right now, I'm launching two other businesses, and there are all these things that have to get done. And that'll keep them out of their creative flow because high change capacity people do not like to slow down. They don't like to pause. They don't like to take time and really sit with and be with something. They want to move and move and move. That ultimately can lead to burnout. It can lead to creative burnout. It also can just lead to physical burnout that makes it very hard to be in your creative flow. So that's what happens if one is really high and the other two are not online. That is how some people's profile looks, but not everyone's. And you might have resonated with some of those things that I said, and you might have even grimaced a little bit and felt a little called out by some of the things that I mentioned, like, oh, I don't like that she knows that about me. But we have a blend of all three capacities, and how that actually works in our lived experience is that we either have limited access, situational access, or reliable access to each of the three capacities. If we have reliable access to all three capacities, we are that kind of well-oiled moving machine. It doesn't mean that things don't take us out or slow us down, or that there isn't vulnerability and there isn't fear, or that there isn't times where we're more creatively alive and other times where we're feeling a little stuck or stagnant. Those things still happen, but we can move through them. We know that that is a seasonal piece, that things shift and change. We don't worry about it. I certainly have weeks where I'm like, I don't have much to say. I don't jump into, and that means I'll never have anything to say again, or oh my God, I'm losing all my value because I don't have anything to say. And in fact, I know that if I really attune and slow down and I'm in my emotional process and I even just like go out into the world and I do the things that I know that inspire my creativity, it'll come right back online. I never worry about it, right? That's part of the high capacity on all three. We might have still blocks at times. We won't always be in our flow, but we trust that we can get back into it. If we're in limited and situational access, on the other hand, when things don't go our way, we might start to collapse into old stories and wounding and pattern and strategies. So, limited access on any of the capacities that I named is going to look like even when things are well, even when things are going good, it's still really hard to access that capacity. So, you are well rested, you are well fed, life is pretty calm, it's pretty stable, things are going well. If it's still hard to slow down and listen to a friend and just be present, if it's still hard to notice when you're sad instead of angry or angry instead of sad, if it's still hard to be with a happy moment, to be present in joy and connection without immediately fearing that you're going to lose it, you probably have limited access to emotional capacity. When things are all good and you still feel like the world is out to get you, or people are untrustworthy, or you don't trust yourself, and feel like you're really running stories of maybe you aren't worthy or you don't have the skills to do this, that probably means that you have limited access to narrative capacity. And when everything's kind of like perfect environment and you still have a hard time getting things done or crossing things off your to-do list or focusing, putting your feelings off to the side and like being like, okay, I want to do this, taking risks, being visible, putting your work out there, that probably means that you have limited access to change capacity. Situational access sits right in the middle, and it is exactly what it says, which is sometimes you can access it, and sometimes you're going to collapse into limited. So, depending on the situation, sometimes you're going to move into reliable, and sometimes you're going to move into limited, depending on what's happening. And that's interesting because depending on who you are as a person, it doesn't necessarily mean that you go from situational to limited in stress. For some people, you might go from situational to reliable in stress. If it's an emergency, you can act, you can show up, you can put your feelings aside and get things done. Or maybe if it's an emergency, you suddenly do like tune out all the noise and you're really present and available for the person in front of you and you can listen to them. But otherwise, you're having a hard time. It could go the other way that in stress, it totally collapses. Okay. And this is a big part of the creative process. When people come to me with creative blocks, this is the first thing I'm going to look at is where are they at on each of the three capacities, and then which level of access do they have? So what's the balance? Is there balance is one way out of balance? And then what's the access point? Without kind of at least situational above access, we're gonna feel blocks in our creative flow. So, capacity expands and contracts. It is not stable in any way, shape, or form. And that is really good news because it means that we can shift it and change it. It's not just who you are, it's not the capacity that you've been given. We can absolutely affect it. And as we strengthen it, what happens is clarity and creativity expand as well. So, in our kind of full capacity, we are all creative beings. I really believe that. I do not believe there is a person on earth who is not creative. I believe there are just different ways in which we express our creativity. So, when capacity expands, we all have access to this well of creativity. And we don't just have access to creativity, we have access to humanity. We have access to the things that create stunning art and the ability to then put that out into the world. When it contracts, we tend to lose clarity and creativity as well. We start feeling more and more stuck, more and more blocked, more depressed, more anxious, more cloudy, more confused. We start feeling a little more dissociative. And it's just harder to show up and even like get things done because it's not just hard to be with our emotions or to put things out into the world. When things contract, we start then having a lot of inner criticism and negative stories like, what's the point? No one wants to read what you have to what you have to say anyways. No one's going to listen. You know, your voice doesn't matter. Your work doesn't matter. You don't matter. We start having all of these negative thoughts, and it really just like pulls us in further and further into the stuckness and away from the flow that we're desiring. All three capacities, though, they work together as a system. So we can either be building positive capacity loops or we can be running negative ones. And at all times, we are either expanding or contracting. And that's something really to look at. So capacity doesn't stay stable. So we're either building or we're atrophying, we're losing, we're draining. It either is going up or down. And the way that they work together is through positive capacity loops. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So all of our imbalances in capacity are created in childhood. These are in the form of adapted strategies. And this often comes because many of us didn't grow up in households where we were taught positive capacity loops. We weren't taught to be kind to ourselves. We weren't taught to take risks, to fall down and get up, and that everything is okay. We weren't taught to listen and attune to ourselves. Many of us were taught to repress our emotions, to hide them, to put them away. If our parents weren't running really positive narratives, we're going to pick those up. Even if our parents were running positive narratives, we can pick up the negative narratives from society. We can pick them up from school, from religious organizations, from communities, from extended family. There's all sorts of ways in which we will pick those types of things up. And in that, we start to realize, like, oh, one is valuable and the other is not. And so usually one of two things happen. People either become more tuned to everyone else's emotions and needs, and then they form a high level of emotional capacity, or they become kind of like production machines, right? The high achieving, put your feelings aside, hyper responsibility, capacity, change capacity driven people that have to really push their emotions down in order to do that. And that imbalance forms. Capacity builds through positive loops and relationship, not isolation or criticism. So the way that we expand our capacity is through kindness. It is through relationship. It is through being seen in what we are experiencing and then creating positive loops, not through isolation and criticism, which is always a way in which we kind of like open up the drain on the bottom of our boat and let all the water in and we start to sink. It is how we just like collapse into a contracted state when we are mean to ourselves, when we're being super critical, when we're in isolation. That does not mean that you can't build capacity while you are refilling your cup if you're an introvert solo, but like forced isolation and hiding is more of the piece. So let's talk about how we build capacity. And I'm going to bridge this. Remember, when we build capacity, we build creativity. We come into our flow. We allow ourselves the clarity, the momentum, the ability to create stunning works of art and then actually put them out into the world and believe that that matters, that we are going to be paid for that, that things are going to work out in our favor. So, three ways in which we can build capacity. One is to first understand capacity. So often, the reason why we can't build it is because we just don't even know that it's there. We don't understand that we have three capacities. We don't understand that being self-critical and mean and, kind of that like push through, driving, like, do it, what's wrong with you? You should be able to do it better or do more, that kind of inner critic voice. We don't know that that drains capacity. Many of us were taught that that is how you get things done. And so over time, that might have worked when we were younger, but capacity is again, I'm gonna like relate it back to the physical body. I believe that it is something that comes naturally easier when we are younger, and then we over time lose it as we age. In the same way that I was always a very strong human until I hit like 39, and suddenly I went to lift something that I always would have been able to lift. And I was like, oh my God, this is so much harder. My muscles started deteriorating as it does when you hit your 40s. That's natural if you're not actively building muscle. But I had always just had natural muscle. Capacity is often the same way. And this is why you also might be a person who's like, well, I used to be able to do this. This used to come easy for me. And now I feel so stuck. That's really normal because our capacity deteriorates and it also our balances can switch. So we can go from someone with very high change capacity to suddenly someone with very high emotional capacity as we age and life happens to us and things happen. And, like there's all the different portals that we move through. It can have a big impact on how we're showing up. So, first thing is to understand capacity. So, step one, check. Hopefully, you understand it a little bit better. Step two is to build positive capacity loops by picking small, obtainable goals and running what I call the positive capacity loop. And what that looks like is you are going to take a tiny goal. So, let's say you would like to start a Substack. You are going to pick a tiny goal. It might be open Substack. Celebrate yourself for doing so. Feel any feelings that you have, but continue to come back to step one, complete. Look at that. To affirm yourself, to say that is proof that you can do it and that you can continue to do it. Then maybe you name your Substack. You want to run them as quickly as possible, and that is the trick. We want to take an action, feel our feelings, tell ourselves a positive story, and then take another action. Start to write something, start a writing practice. Maybe you write 15 minutes a day. Don't set your goal as, okay, I'm going to start my Substack and I'm going to write my first piece and it's going to be done today and I'm going to publish it. And then, then I'm going to do this, that, and the other. And if you're someone with high change capacity, you might have that kind of a reaction. You want to start very slow, and you could do 20, 30, 50, 100 positive capacity loops in a day. You can take lots of small steps, but every time you want to breathe, you want to feel any feelings that you have, shake them out of your body, give yourself some congratulations, give yourself some credit, notice any stories that are happening, rewrite any of those stories. So if you catch yourself in a story of like, it doesn't matter, that's not enough, really pausing and rewriting that story, telling yourself it does matter, it is enough, I'm going to keep going. It's just one step on a big, huge journey, but it's still a step and it matters. And to really speak kindness into your actions. Criticism drains capacity, kindness creates capacity. But I will put a little caveat here, which is that when I say kindness, I mean real kindness, which also includes truth. So if I am, for example, if I set a goal and then I don't do my small action step, kindness is not, it's okay, you're great, it's all going to work out anyways. Kindness is, it is okay, and we're going to do it today, right? Because you don't want to let yourself run in away from the action. You want to include truth into kindness. And then the last one is working with a capacity specialist because we often do need someone to help us unravel our narratives, expand our ability to stay present and release emotions, and get back into action. And what I find is that people are really good at finding support in one of those three things. Most people are really good at offering support in one of those three things. But when we don't loop them together, it's why things don't actually change. You can't just do mindset work and expect your capacity to change. You can't just do somatic processing and attunement and, trauma release and breath work and EMDR and all these amazing, wonderful things that I do and am trained with and love, but you can't just release emotions and expect capacity to expand. It actually doesn't. And that is one of the big fallacies with capacity is that If we do this emotional work, we can expand our nervous systems and then our capacity. People often think that the nervous system is capacity, and it's not. We can expand our nervous system and still feel frozen when it comes to action and then get into action, right? But that isn't going to work. You can't just be like, okay, I'm going to force through it. I'm going to feel the fear and do it anyway. I'm going to hustle. I'm going to push. Because if you don't have balanced capacity, and if you aren't feeling those feelings and you aren't challenging those narratives, what's going to happen is that you are going to do a lot of start-stop patterns. You're going to end up with a lot of collapse, a lot of burnout in your system. So we don't want that either. So, how do you start to understand deeper capacity and to really attune into raising your capacity? The first thing I'm going to invite you into is taking my capacity assessment. So, this is a specific assessment that I spent 6, 7, 8 months creating, that will ask you questions that will help you determine, and in the end, it'll give you not just what your highest capacity is or your strongest capacity, it'll actually give you your access in all three capacities. So, you'll be able to see, am I balanced? Am I totally out of balance? You'll be able to see whether or not you're in limited or situational or reliable capacity on all three, and really get a sense of your current capacity profile so that you know where to start. And if you want to dive in deeper, I invite you to follow me over on Instagram or find me on Substack Capacity. It's Capacity to Impact, at Jen Underwood, and go ahead and dive in deeper to some of the teachings and trainings offered on capacity. Once we increase our capacity, our creative flow is present. It's there all the time. Again, we might have moments where it's like, oh, I don't quite know where I put that, but we know how to get back to it. We know how to be with it. Everything gets so much easier because we have the capacity for that ease and that flow. Because as capacity raises, clarity raises, and creativity raises. And it is this beautiful, lovely symbiotic relationship. If you are feeling blocked, I invite you to not push into creativity, but to think about instead looking first at capacity and knowing that as you expand that, creativity will flow right back in. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that this was impactful. I'd love to hear from you if it was. And I look forward to continuing to support you in your capacity and creativity journey if you would like that. Thank you so much.